All right, hello everybody. I have something for you that is a little different from usual and possibly a little fun. We've all heard, or at least anyone who's interested in, so-called cryptozoology has heard stories about, or at least heard that sound effect that has been labeled the bloop. Right? That was a sound effect that was released by, a government agency or by several government agencies that showed a sound that a lot of how to put it that was thought to be possibly of organic origin. But what I'm going to show you today, hopefully, is evidence, or at least I'm gonna kind of try to make the case that the reason that people think that it sounds organic is because specifically the 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 sound effect that was released to the public was actually sped up by a factor of 16. Now, the thing about the bloop sound is that it doesn't have a lot of structure. It has one very slow, very non-structured kind of sound that happens for a short period of time, followed by a long silence, followed by one more sharp sound. And so, what is worth noting is that because the sound itself has so little actual structure, you can get a very different feel for what it is, for what it sounds like, as you change the rate at which as you change the sample rate. Now remember, the people that released it reduced or sped it up by 16 times to make it roughly a 10-second sound, but in fact it was much longer than that. Now, the first thing I want to show you is a waveform of what it sounds like for, or at least to show you what a waveform of, say, human speech sounds like. So let's do that next, right? Right here is a waveform of me saying something. So I'm going to mute my microphone and I'm going to play this and it'll come through the speakers and get recorded, I hope, assuming I've set this up right. But what you can see in the spectrum is that it has a lot of structure. There's a lot of things where the amplitude goes up and then down and then up and then down, and there's lots of little bits in the waveform that we can see. So let's play this real quick, and this is human speech. All right, here we go. As you can see, speech has a lot of structure to its waveform, which means that even if you speed it up or slow it down, you can still use that structure to tell what's going on. So there we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to speed this up by a factor of 2, and you're going to see that even though it sounds different in pitch, that you can still tell that someone is speaking. So let's do that. Alright, this is the same waveform sped up by a factor of 2. There was no attempt to maintain the original pitch of the speech. So let's listen to this again and try to see how how I sound different. I sound much faster, but at the same time you can tell that there's information in the structure of what I'm saying.
As you can see, speech has a lot of structure to its waveform, which means that even if you speed it up or slow it down, you can still use that structure to tell what's going on.
So there we go for that. As you can tell, there's a lot of ups and downs in the sound structure that make it clear that there's information in that. You can still understand the words that I'm saying because those words are being sped up, but because what you're listening to is the structure and not the pitch of those things, right? In theory, if I had different vocal cords, I could speak at that pitch more slowly as I'm speaking now, and the length of the sound file would be the same as the original sound file, but the pitch would be higher, right? So we're seeing that there's differences between pitch and structure. All right, so let's take a look at the very famous 16 times sped up bloop sound, right? Let's do that. All right. Here is the bloop as I got it off of that website at 16 times speed. So there's a little bit of noise or nothing at the beginning. There's a little bit of noise at the end, but this isn't a very long thing. I'll cut the empty parts out later when we lengthen it out. But this is what the bloop sounds like on that website. And here's why people got confused about it. Give it a listen. So that does sound like it could be something, organic maybe, right? We've got an early part where there's a definite kind of a sound. Then we have two kind of clunking noises. And the clunking noises aren't really that interesting, but what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on that first sound. So let's slow this down by a factor of 2. All right, here's the bloop sound with most of the noise at the start and the beginning cut off and slowed down. The same way that I sped up my voice, you can slow down a sound in Audacity the same way. This is the bloop. Now this sound is only going to be 8 times faster than what it really sounded like when they measured it. Here we go. Now, that one sounds still like it could be some kind of thing, like pushing out a bubble or something like that, right? Some kind of organic creature. But we've only gone by a factor of 2. This is still 8 times faster than you expect. And as you can see, unlike my speech, this early part here doesn't have a lot of structure to it. It's kind of just a big blob on the waveform. Let's go to one that is slowed down by another factor of 2. So here we go next. This is the bloop at 4 times faster than it was actually measured. Okay, here we are. Now we're looking at the thing at 4 times speed rather than 16. As you can see, there's still not really any structure in any of the sound. But let's give it a listen and see what it sounds like now. So now it sounds very different. The early part is now starting to sound more like an actual rumbling noise. The last part, that little bump, is pretty clearly some kind of a thump, right? So let's go one more factor of 2. That's going to put us at only 2 times faster than actually it was measured. And I'm going to cut out, I think I'm going to be cutting out the thump at that point too. Let's check this out. All right, this is the bloop at 2 times speed and without the thump. What you'll also see is that I had to amplify the sound a little bit because, generally speaking, we're now dealing with sounds that are extremely low in frequency. And so unless you have really good headphones or really good speakers and a really good subwoofer, you won't pick these up as well. And so I amplified them a little bit to make them louder so that we can still hear them. So let's listen to this. This is the bloop still at 2 times faster than what they actually measured. And this is just the rumbling, the little bloopy part at the very beginning. So let's give it a listen. Now, I could barely hear that on my speakers, or it was a little difficult to hear it. But now it definitely is sounding more like a rumbling of something. And that's exactly what the scientists said that they thought it was, actually. They thought it was, a glacier breaking or something like that, some kind of, tectonic shift happening, and like something shifting along things. But now you can see it sounds a lot more just like rumbling. It doesn't have structure like a whale song or speech would have. It just sounds like rocks now. And we're still 2 times faster than reality. So let's go to the last stage where we go all the way to the slow thing. And you may not be able to hear this unless your speakers are good. So I'm going to play it. I amplified it as much as I could. And, here we go. You can see there's not a whole lot of structure to this, as opposed to like my voice, where each word has a couple of different little wiggles on it. We've got maybe 4 wiggles here. There's not much going on. Now let's give this a listen. It might be hard to hear. I did my best to try to make it as loud as possible so that you can hear it in your speakers. But here we go. So I can barely hear that on my speakers. If I turned my subwoofer up all the way, I would kind of pick up a little bit of it, but it's all at fairly low frequencies compared to anything that we're used to hearing. And as you can see, there's not a lot of structure to it. So what's going on here is that we have a sound that was heard, But unfortunately, to make it shorter and to make it more palatable for common equipment, it was sped up by 16 times, which made it sound more like something living than it actually does. The 2x speed one is probably pretty close to. You can see where we're going. It's definitely sounding more like just rocks rumbling, or at least it's more of a stretch to call it a creature making a sound, right? So we've heard these all. Now you may be wondering, what happens to the higher frequency tones since I'm just slowing this down? No, right? I started with a 16 times sped up thing, and I slowed it down 16 times. It was originally sampled at, let's say 44 kilohertz, which means that the fastest frequency that it can properly reproduce is about 22 kilohertz. That's still beyond human hearing for the most part. But then we slowed it down by 16 times, and so we'll just do a little basic math. So what we'll do is I'll pop this up. All right. So this is the calculation I did. If the original sound had about a 44 kilohertz sample rate, then the highest frequency that it can record without distortion is 22 kilohertz. If we divide that 22 kilohertz by an additional 16, that gives us 1.3 kilohertz. Now, you might be saying, well, 1.3 kilohertz, that seems really low. But in fact, 1.3 kilohertz is actually quite a high pitch for human voices, for music, that kind of stuff. You will definitely pick up 1375 in the harmonics of a lot of music, in the higher harmonics of a lot of music, but most of the center of the piano, so to speak, is all way below that. To give you an idea of what we're talking about, middle A, I think, is 440 hertz. Let me see if I have that right. Yeah, middle A, A4, is 440 hertz. So I'm going to play just a little bit of that, try to keep it not super loud, but we'll play just a little bit of that, just a little sample, and so you can hear 440 hertz. Here we go. That is middle A. That's 440 hertz. I'm going to crank it up to 1375, which I can do thanks to this little web app that I found. Okay, 1375. You ready? Here we go. Okay, so that was 1375 hertz. It's a little above F6, so it's a little over 2 octaves higher than A4. And you can tell that's a pretty high frequency, right? How to put this? So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we have a lot of what is commonly understood as sound in the range of what we could have heard, the fundamentals at least, if the bloop was actually making a real sound. We can see that there was not a lot of structure in the bloop noise. It has, at most, 4 kind of wiggles in it, in its amplitude, right? And as we can see, although that 16 times sped up sound did kind of sound like it could have been made by a creature, as we slowed it down more and more and more, it sounded a lot less like a creature and more like a pair of rocks grinding against each other. And the reason for that is because of the structure that it lacks. Because it lacks so much structure, because there's so little information in the amplitude channel, the frequency channel gets picked up as the information instead. And as we can see, there's not a whole lot there. We're definitely in the range where if there was anything faster going on, we would have picked it up still, right? So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to show about the bloop and the misconception that it sounds organic when it really doesn't when you actually slow it down. And this is also a good demonstration of the difference between of what Fourier transforms are useful for, right? You convert the frequency information into amplitude information and vice versa, and things look very different, as you will know if you've ever looked at the Fourier transform of a simple function. With that, I hope this was interesting and fun and a little different from the stuff that I usually do, but my science, what do you call it, like senses were tingling when I heard this sound for a while back, and I thought this would be a fun video to make to do kind of a little scientific analysis. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.